So if you feel like you are working hard but you're struggling financially, you are not alone. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 mistakes that I see a lot of my clients making that hopefully you can learn from them and not make those mistakes too. So the first mistake I see a lot of people making is having one stream of income. And so I know us millennials, we tend to work at a place for 3 to 5 years before we move on to the next particular role or job because we're progressing in our career. But if you lose that one stream of income, you might find yourself in a position where you're going to have to drastically change your life. Or you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to be able to quickly find another job. Maybe, maybe not. I've got friends who've lost jobs and they've taken more than a year because of the economy that we find ourselves in. They've taken more than a year to find the replacement income. And fortunately, they've had emergency funds and things that I teach on this channel, which has eased the burden. But if they didn't have that, they'd actually find themselves in a position where they could be depressed, they could be down, they could be concerned about how they're going to be able to cover even the basic costs like their food and their mortgage on a monthly basis. The next big mistake that I see people having is not having a spending plan. And as you've probably discovered on this channel, I don't talk about budgeting because for me personally, that's been too constrictive. I need to track every dollar and every cent. But when I started having a spending plan myself personally, I knew where my income was going towards. And what I mean by that is I know that I make a certain sum of money per month. I've got financial goals and my income goes towards those goals automatically. If you don't have a spending plan or at least a budget, you are actually going to find yourself in a position where you're going to spend more money than what actually comes in, or you're going to find yourself in a position of never getting closer to your true financial goals, the things that you really want to achieve in life. So I encourage you guys, if you don't have a spending plan, get a spending plan. Identify what your income is, identify what your expenses are, identify what your goals are, and ensure that you are channeling your funds that way, because if you don't, you're going to start spending money, or you're going to continue to spend money, let me rather put it that way, on things that aren't really important to you. For myself personally, before I had a spending plan, I ate out all the time. I spent thousands over the course of a year on food and different activities that never got me closer to my goal or to my goals. But when I had a spending plan which aligned to my goals, all of a sudden I look back a year and I'm a lot closer to several of my goals. So guys, get a spending plan. It will change your life. Again, it's not the budget where it's constrictive, but it's actually something that you and your spouse, if you're married, can get together, formulate a plan for your finances, and it will ease the burdens that you guys might have today. The next mistake that I see people tend to make is have too much debt. And so we might have different views on debt. For me personally, I'd like to be debt-free because it positions me to be more generous. For you, you might be okay with a certain level of debt, but more often than not, people that I've worked with, they've had too much debt. So they've got house debt, car debt, lots of credit cards, 5 to 10 credit cards. They've got store credit cards, and the mountain of debt just builds and builds, and it puts them under financial pressure on a monthly basis. They're not always sure how they're going to pay for these particular debts that they've got, so they're paying the minimum. In some cases, they're skipping. So you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're allowing debt or immediate gratification to put you in this position where you are acquiring things on credit only to worry about how you're going to pay for it. I would encourage you guys to list your debts. Use a simple approach like the debt snowball, which says list all your debt, identify the smallest debt, and then pay that off. And as you pay that debt off, take the payment that you would have put onto that debt, apply it to the next one, and you'll get to a position where you can either have a manageable amount of debt where you know that your income on a monthly basis can cover it. Alternatively, you can find yourself in a position where you're completely debt-free. Again, start today, guys. Don't believe the lie that we just meant to live with debt. That's not true. We can put certain parameters in place where we can actually control how much we spend on a monthly basis. We can live within our means, and we can get to a position of debt-free. Again, having been in debt and having been debt-free, just the lifestyle where I can be more generous and also not worry about how I'm going to pay for certain things on a monthly basis or be concerned about making that payment on a monthly basis is liberating. Trust me, you can do it too. Question I have to you, which mistakes are you making? And if you do find yourself in a position where you are currently making mistakes or you need some extra income, comment guide beneath this video and I'd love to send you over my free cash guide, which is going to show you how you can find extra income within your spending plan, or if you want to call it a budget, within your budget. The next mistake I see people making is not saving for emergencies. So always thinking that things are going to be okay. We're never going to have this emergency. And I've got 2 quick stories. We had an emergency last year, it's 2025, so in 2024, where my engine blew out on my car. and I just spent $8,000 on fixing my engine. Wasn't planned for, but I had an emergency fund. If I didn't have that emergency fund, I would have found myself in a position where I needed to put it on a credit card or take out a loan and pay 15 to 20%, or maybe even more than that in terms of interest. But because I had an emergency fund, I didn't have to worry about how I was going to be able to pay that particular bill as it became due. The second instance was a few years ago too, where I had a fence at my house and the fence fell over. I didn't have an emergency fund at the time, and in that case I was forced to put the fence repair on a credit card, and what that meant was a bill that should have cost me $600 ended up costing me $700 or $750 in terms of the interest that it accrued because I paid it off over a period of time. And I'll be honest, it was just the stage of life that we found ourselves in where we didn't have the income or the level of income that we have today, and we just felt that it was the only way, but that wasn't the only way. If we had set aside money for emergencies, we could have paid for that cash. Question I quite often times get asked is $1,000 enough? I don't think so, not in this day and age. My engine, as I just mentioned, was $8,000. The fence was closer to $1,000, so $1,000 would have covered that, but more often than not, emergencies cost a lot more than $1,000. So I'd say start with $1,000, but quickly build it up. If you can have a couple of months worth of expenses covered in terms of your emergency fund amount, it's going to put you at ease. So make sure that you do that, guys, but also make sure that you don't spend the emergency fund on things that are not true emergencies. See that money as a set and forget, so it's over here, but I'm only going to tap into that as and when I have my emergencies, because you're going to have them. We live in this world where things do happen, so plan for your emergencies. And the final mistake I see people make is not thinking long term. They live in the right here, right now. Again, I was the same a couple of years ago, living in South Africa. I was making good money, but I spent every single dollar or rand at the time every month. So my account pretty much emptied out. I wasn't saving money for retirement. And I look at some of my friends who actually made the conscious decision to actually set aside money for retirement. They've actually got a lot more saved up and set aside than what I do at this point in time, purely because I was living in the right here and right now. I see a lot of people doing the exact same thing, where they are always going out, they're always eating, they're always buying new things, but not thinking about the future. And before you know it, you are going to find yourself where you're in your 40s, 50s, or even 60s, and you're thinking about retirement. But if you were in your 20s and you actually had a plan where you were setting aside income towards or actually investing for your future on a monthly basis, you'd get to that particular ages that I just mentioned, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where you'd not have to worry about, am I going to have enough? And so, but if you do find yourself in the position where you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, and you're concerned with whether you have enough, if you don't have enough, I encourage you guys to consider finding out ways in which you can bridge the gap between what you believe you're going to need to have in retirement and what you currently have. And this could be generating extra income through a side hustle, starting a business. It's a whole host of things. So if you do find yourself where you are concerned about how you're going to be able to cover your bills in the future, or you're going to have enough set aside for retirement, don't worry. There are lots of ways that you can bridge the gap, and you can bridge the gap pretty quickly. But start thinking long term. Start thinking about the future now. I'm not saying don't enjoy your life. I'm not saying you can't go out and you can't do fun things. But what I am saying is consider actually saving and setting aside money, investing into your future right now, because your future self is going to thank you. So those are the 5 money mistakes that keep people broke. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and to follow for more videos just like this.